Okay guys, welcome to the second segment of this video where I'm going to explain or at least try to explain the basics of our program. So over here we have our includes, I have an include string. I think I mainly use this for get line, IO stream obviously for the C out and C in, F stream for file manipulation, and then using namespace std so that I don't have to input like the std keywords and stuff. Include design box, so this is like my personal header file where I put most of my design stuff that I use for my other projects as well. So I have here my color function that I did not make. I got this from a website online, but it works really good. As well as the gotoxy function, so the go to xy function for the design as well. Set window, I believe we weren't able to use, so this is just a function to resize the console window, but we just use the default. Over here is my function for the loading screen, so I made the functionality and then Miss Andrea made the design over here. So there we go. Also here I have a function for auto upper. So if you notice in the earlier segments, our inputs usually or usually is not case sensitive, so it's thanks to this function that I made. I made use basically of toOpper function, which is a predefined function. I used that to make my own user-defined function. So toOpper function just basically converts a character and converts it into its uppercase counterpart, basically. And then what I did is I made a for loop for that, and for the function I used a string input as parameter, so that it's not limited to one character only. So I can input like a whole line or a whole sentence in here, and then it's gonna return the full all capitalized version of that line or sentence. So that's what this does. I also made a auto lower version, so but we weren't able to use this, I don't think. But yeah, that's there. Over here we have our border. So if you noticed in our program, one of the design was the border. This is how we made use of it. So I also made this, but Miss Andrea is gonna be the one to explain that. Over here is my headers. Over here I actually have a hash define piece of code here. So basically if I want to use getch, I can just use the keyword getch, and then what that does is it's gonna replace it with system pos, which is the default like getch for C++ in Visual Studio. So whenever I want to use getch, I just have to type this. Okay, now moving on, we have here some global variables that I can use across multiple files. So this is just basically the size of how many players I can have. So I can manually just put 50 to like my arrays and lists and stuff, but this is easier this way because, for example, if I somehow want to expand my player count to 100, I can just change it here and it's all good. And over here is the number of players I currently have. So yeah, over here I have my include player.h. In player.h over here I have basically my player class. So in my player class I have a bunch of methods in. I also made 2 instances of player, so all caps player for calling the methods inside, and then the player array is where I store each of the data for individual players. So over here we have the for members, I have a username which is stored in string, total points in int, and then password is string as well, and then their login status. So basically if the player is logged in or not, it's gonna put true or false. So those are what these are for. Over here I have the login status method. Basically if I call this, This is basically what you see over here. This is the login status. Basically, it shows which player is logged in, or if any player is logged in at all. So that's what this does. So over here we just have a for loop that checks, or like goes through all the players, checks which player is logged in, so which player has the logged in boolean here set to true, so that's gonna be the player that's logged in. And if it finds that, it saves the index number. It's gonna activate this logged in local variable here to true, so we can check here if not logged in, so it's gonna say no user is currently signed in. Then obviously the rank one doesn't change. Over here, if the player was logged in, then it's gonna display here whatever was saved in temp, etc, etc. So that's my login status method inside player structure. Over here I have a method as well. It's basically for me to easily get the index of the player who is logged in. So if I want to somehow know which player is logged in without manually checking, so I have a for loop here that checks for that, and then it returns whatever index of the player is logged in. So for example, player 3 is logged in, then index 3 will be input here, and then index 3 will be returned. If no one is logged in, it's gonna return 0. Over here is my sort function, so pretty basic sorting here. So basically checks if the first player's total points is less than the second player's total points, then they're gonna swap stats or data. Yeah, pretty self-explanatory here. Pretty small method, pretty small function. And over here we have the player settings. So this I think is pretty long because there's like 5 cases here for the different user settings. So we have register, we have login, log out, delete user, and then show users. So over here is the menu for that, and then for the cases, basically here we go. So for the register, this is the prompt, so no spaces allowed. Also the whatever as you can see here, this is how I was able to use my auto upper from box.cpp. Over here, it's my auto upper. Basically whatever the user inputs here, that input is going to be automatically all caps, so that there's uniformity in my leaderboards. Also, it's easier to mix and match or like compare stuff later on. So that's how I use my auto upper function. And then over here is basically searching if that username already exists. So if you somehow like, if there's already a real len there and then you type real len while registering, this is gonna be triggered. So if exists, it's gonna say that username is already taken. If not, then that's gonna be when you enter your password. So and then after inputting your password, stuff is gonna be inputted here. So your password will go to the password, username will go to the username of that player. Yeah, so if you remember correctly, it is the global variable that I used earlier. It starts at 1, so if there's no players, it's gonna start at 1. I put 0 at vacant, so that's like I put n at 0 if there is, or if no one is logged in, basically. So yeah, I start at 1. So after that, the n is gonna be incremented, so the next time someone registers, the n is gonna be 2. So that's how this works. Also, the logged in is going to be false by default, so after registering you have to log in as well. And here we have the prompt that that user was successfully created. So that's my register program. Over here in the login, almost the same. So you enter a username, gets auto offered, searches if it's logged in or if it exists already, If it does exist, then you have to input your password. If the password is correct, then you get successfully logged in. Your status becomes true, or your login status becomes true. Actually, first it's gonna check all the previous. It's basically gonna set all of the players into false logged in, so that when I set the current player into login true, then he's gonna be the only player that's logged in. So that's how I make use of the boolean logged in. So there can only be one player that is logged in at a time, which makes sense because you can't have two players logged in at the same time. So that's what this is for. Else, if you did not input the correct password here, then nothing's gonna be changed. Then another else here, if your username does not exist, then user not found over here. Over here in the logout is basically very easy. So I put the int id. It's like a temporary thing. So if you remember earlier, this is my index method. This basically checks or returns the index number of the current user logged in. So for example, I'm logged in as Riolen, and Riolen has like an index number of 3, so it's gonna return 3, so the value of id is 3. And then I'm just basically say logging out as player, and then the id is 3, so that's gonna be logging out as Riolen. And then player id, the login of Riolen will be false, so no one is gonna be logged in. So that's how the no user is currently logged in is going to be triggered. So pretty basic, my logout. Yeah. And the delete user, same thing. Input auto opera, search if it exists. If it does exist, then you will have to input the password first, since you can't delete other people's stuff without knowing their password. So you can only delete the ones that you know the password of. So that's for the security for purposes. If the password is correct, then the way I delete it. So I'm gonna set their username to blank, total points to 0, password to blank, and log into false. And then I'm gonna decrement my n, since I lost a player, number of player. And then pretty basic, basically the same as earlier. If it's not correct, then it's not correct. If the user was not found, then the user was not found. Pretty self-explanatory. And over here, it just basically shows the registered users. So because the leaderboards only shows like the top 10, so this can be useful in that regard. Also, if you don't know if you're already registered, or you don't know which players are which, so you can easily check which players are registered. So simple for loop that displays every username starting from index 1. So index 1 until whatever number of players I have already. And there we go. So that's it for my player structure. Now let's move on to my converter. So this is basically what I use to easily convert decimal to Roman numerals and Roman numerals to decimal. Basically what this does is it converts decimal numbers to Roman numerals. So I have here a parameter, an int parameter. So this is where the user puts a number, so for example 10, and then it's gonna do a whole lot of conversion here using these arrays and stuff. And then I have a formula that I think I got this from the internet, this formula here, and it's gonna return whatever is the result. So this result is a string, so it gets its stuff from this array, as you can see here. So the final result will be returned. And then over here is its counterpart. This one is pretty easy, I guess, because I basically just use this, kind of like reverse it. So I have here an input, a string input. So for example, input v, and then I use auto operate here, so you don't have to input capital V if you don't want to. So for example, I input v, and then I'm just gonna basically search through all of the possible things here, and whatever decimal number was matched with V, that's gonna be what's gonna be returned here. So for example, it detected that V is equal to 5, then it's gonna return 5. So you can see here, pretty basic stuff. Over here is my converter, so the converter menu. These are all just menus, and then how I'm able to call the decimal to Roman numerals, as you can see here. So this is the input. It's stored in the decimal variable, and basically it's gonna put here as a parameter, as I call the decimal to Roman numeral function, and then over here it's just vice versa, Roman numeral to decimal instead, and then invalid input, and then my exit case. Yeah, that's basically my converter.h. This is my Roman numerals, the kind of like a base code basically for my Roman numerals conversions. Lastly, for my game structure or class, basically all the game mechanics is stored here. So I did not store any member variables here because I didn't need to. All I have here are methods, I think. Yeah, so first is my leaderboards. This basically just displays my leaderboards. Andre is going to be explaining this because this is more on design. But basically, simple for loop displays the username, their total points, as well as their rank. Over here is my decimal to Roman numerals, the easy difficulty. So like I said earlier in the first segment, everything is basically the same. It's just that it gets progressively harder, and then the points become larger and larger in quantity as well. So I'm just gonna explain the easy one, and then I don't have to explain the other ones. So over here I have here a random number generator. So from 1 to 90, I think, it's gonna get stored into this int decimal. So between this range, so for example I get 50, then my decimal number will be 50, and then that's gonna be the decimal number that you have to guess or answer. So you're gonna have to answer like L or something. So that's how I make use of a random value. Over here I make use of auto upper again, so that it auto capitalizes here if the answer is correct. So if answer is equal to the whatever is returned here, then you get plus points. If not, then you get negative points, and then it's gonna show the correct answer as well. And then for the Roman numerals to decimal easy mode, basically the same. So you have your random. As you can see here, the range gets bigger and bigger as the difficulty progresses. Oh, sorry, I'm out of frame. And there we go. And then in hard, it's 400 to 4K now. If answer is correct, then plus points. If not, minus points. Here I have my save data method or save data function. This is how I save the data, the standing, the points, the usernames, the password. So I made use of off stream or out file stream. We open data.txt. If the data is if the file is open, execute this. If not, I can display this error message, and then I can also pinpoint here at which method I was or I encountered this error. So if this gets displayed, then I know the error is somewhere in this function. Anyway, so over here we also have a close function here, so it gets closed. Okay, so in order to save, basically I go through each so this for loop goes through each index of my player. So if I have 5 players, then it's gonna go index 1 until 5, and then so it's gonna save everything, and it's all separated by spaces. So the first one items that's gonna be saved is the username. So this is gonna be this space. So this is the space, and then the total points space password space, and then true or false. If it's true, I basically like save the words true, since you can't really store a boolean value in here. Or I guess you can using 0 and 1, but yeah, I just use true or false because this is I think it works for me best. And yeah, that's how it basically works. So it goes through every player. So after you doing the index 1, it gets incremented. Now it's in index 2, and that's basically how I save my stuff. So I call this a lot of times, or I call this whenever possible, basically, so we don't risk losing the data. But like I said earlier, you also have a manual save option there if you really want to be sure. Then here we have my load data. So this is basically how I reload everything from here. I put every data here into their corresponding like arrays, so in my player arrays. So okay, so I make use of while here, while get line. So it goes through each line here. So it goes through this first line. It's gonna check. I have here a space counter, so this basically detects how many spaces I have gone through. So if I haven't gone through any spaces, then obviously I'm still at the username part, so this is gonna be executed. So yeah, and then if it detects a second space or the first space, then it's gonna run this one. So it's gonna be stored in the total points here, temporary arrays. And then after I each store all the username and total points in their corresponding arrays, then I convert them into the original array of the player data type. So player here is going to be equal to the username I, so whatever is stored in the index 1 here, it's going to be stored in the index 1 here. And then for the total points, since obviously if you save in the text file, it's going to be automatically converted into a string, so I have to reconvert it back to an integer so I can use it for my sort, since obviously you need it to be an int data type so I can sort it. So that's I use stoi predefined function. Total points is still a string, password still a string, and then over here I basically reconvert the string literal true or false into a boolean true or false. And yeah, that's how I load my data from text file back to the player array. And then here lastly is the main menu for the game, basically. So this is the game.main menu. You have here first the choice whether you want to Desi to Roma or Roma to Desi. Over here you can select what difficulty you want. So if you selected 1, then the easy mode will be called, and etc, etc. Over here is the difficulty. You've already seen this. So if you want to check the differences between the difficulties, then this is what gets called. This is the exit and valid input, and then over here is basically for the vice versa stuff, so Roman numeral to decimals. And there you go. So back to our source here. These I don't think I don't need anymore. Actually, this was for my debugging stuff. Yeah, this was when I was testing the randomizer. Yeah. So over here, the first thing that's gonna be called is the load data, so that as soon as the program starts, the data gets loaded, so everything is updated and stuff. After that, I basically call my loading function from design box, so that's the loading animation you see at the start. And then in choice for my do while here, and then this is the menu. And then this is where I call all my stuff. So case 1 is my converter, so rn.converter. My game is game.main menu. player.settings is the user settings. Game.leaderboards if you want to see the leaderboards, and then save data here. And as you can see here, even if you did not save, you just simply exited, the game will be saved still, even if you didn't manually save, so that maximum security and reliability. Also at the start of the do while, it always sorts the players. So this one, like the save, I always call this as much as I can, so that the users are always updated according to their number of points, so that the leaderboards is always updated, as well as the save data here. It's always gonna be ranked according to points. Clear screen over here. Here login status, I already explained that. So that's like the status at the top, so like which user is logged in, if there's any player logged in at all. And then on the right side is the rank 1 player. Then this is the title. This can be explained by Miss Andrea. She made this Desiroma title here. And then yeah, I think that's all there is to explain in the most simplest form.